Russia's deadliest strike on Kyiv in months shattered the capital just days after Ukraine's Independence Day. Not just homes and schools, but Europe's own diplomatic offices were torn apart. Zelenskyy's words cut sharp. He said, "This is a strike against Ukraine, a strike against Europe, a strike against Trump." And the White House, it called it not surprising. This isn't just news, this is the fault line of our future. And in this video, we're going deeper into stories the headlines miss. From swamps turned into tank traps, to Ukraine's ancient cities that are rewriting history, to Europe's cultural stages becoming propaganda battlegrounds. If you think you've heard it all, you haven't. Stay with me. This update is worth your time. Hi, I'm Slavie, and this is Ukraine Update on channel Yarochenko, where Russian propaganda gets wrecked, fascists get roasted, and truth still fights back. Before we dive in, hit subscribe, drop a like, leave a comment as well, and share this video. Your social currency keeps Ukraine's story louder than Russia's lies. Missiles in the dark, windows blown out at Europe's own embassy in Kyiv. This wasn't just an attack on a city. It was an attack on Europe's dignity. At least 23 civilians killed, including children. EU delegation and British Council buildings were damaged. EU and UK summoned the Russian envoys. Zelenskyy said this is a strike against Europe, a strike against Trump as well. But the White House responded with not happy but also not surprised. Also, Kellogg said these egregious attacks threaten the peace the president is pursuing. The White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt didn't just call the massacre in Kyiv not surprising, she also pointed to Ukraine's strikes on Russian oil refineries, as if that somehow balances the scales. But those refineries aren't civilian targets. They produce the very fuel that powers the jets, the tanks, and the missiles that kill Ukrainians in their homes. There is no equivalence. Ukraine is choking the supply lines of a war machine. Russia is murdering civilians to break a nation's spirit and completely wipe it out. So, to suggest those are the same is idiotic. It's surrender dressed as neutrality, and it tells Kremlin one thing. America is willing to rationalize the killing of Ukrainian children, giving Putin the green light to keep killing with more massive drone and missile strikes. That is the line we must shatter. France's Macron warned if Putin avoids meeting Zelenskyy, Trump will have been played. And he is right. Who is playing who here? Macron warning Trump, don't let Putin dodge. EU capitals debating sanctions, plus using frozen Russian assets, plus Nordic allies pledging $500 million to fund US weapons for Ukraine. Also, Poland vetoes refugee benefits, gets to have fatigue bleeding into politics. Europe is split right now. Tougher rhetoric, slower in delivery. Poland's politics echo, but Ukraine's survival isn't optional for Europe, especially. And if Trump wants to claim peace, he must prove he's not Putin's pawn. The future of this war may come down to one thing: who runs out of air defense first? US approved sale of 3,350 Aram missiles. Intel opens Europe's biggest ammo plant, 100,000 shells a year by 2027. Ukraine is also developing unjammable fiber optic drones, 50 to 100 kilometers in range. Also, Ukraine is saying Neptune modernization whispers up 1,000 kilometers in range. This is the arms race of survival. Ukraine isn't just buying, it's inventing. Every drone that slips past Russian jamming is a message. The future belongs to innovation, not empire. On Independence Day, Ukraine didn't just celebrate independence, it struck deep. There was a prisoner of war exchange, 146 for 146, also Kursk NPP, transformer fire reactor number 3 at half power now, also Usluga fuel terminal, major fire there. Canada pledged 1.5 billion and Norway pledged 700 million. Independence Day wasn't just about parades, it was about proof. Proof Ukraine can bring its people home. Proof Ukraine can strike Russia's war machine inside its borders. The real sanctions. And proof allies must stand for a just peace with money, with weapons, and with will. Now is not the time to back up. When Russia bombs embassies, culture fights back. British Council in Kyiv office was shattered in the August 28th missile strike. They've been in Ukraine since 1990s, even destroyed. They vowed to keep working. Also, Venice Film Festival is happening right now. There was a huge Russian flag displayed right in the middle of all the other Western nations. Ukraine's MFA said this is hypocrisy, indifference in supporting more terror. Now, Woody Allen also had a virtual appearance in a Moscow film festival. Ukraine's MFA said this is an insult to victims, a propaganda gift to Moscow as well. Also, notice how it's only pedophiles and criminals and sex offenders that support Russia 100% of the time. Mark my words. This war isn't only missiles, it's memory, it's symbols, it's culture. Russia wants the world to forget Ukraine, or worse, normalize its terror as if it belongs on the same stage. That's why Ukraine's survival isn't just about defending land, it's defending truth in classrooms, on film festivals, in art, and in memory. Because when culture is erased, history is rewritten. And when history is twisted, there is no hope for a better and peaceful future. Only in truth and in lessons honestly learned from history can peace be built. That's why Ukraine must endure. That's why Ukraine must win. Long before Moscow and long before Rome, Ukraine was already building the first cities on Earth. The trillion mega sites. The 100 to 3600 BCE, up to 320 hectares, larger than Mesopotamian cities. The populations of these mega sites were from 10,000 to 30,000. That's crazy for that time. The houses were in concentric circles. There was urban planning, and this was 6,000 years ago. They had to assembly houses. There was early forms of democracy even, and civic life. Trillions also burned their houses in cycles, which is a cultural reset, also a renewal, which now makes sense. It's a process that made Ukraine's earth, dirt, so black and so fertile. That's innovation. Also, they painted pottery, figurines, weaving. This was a culture of equality as well. No palaces, there were no kings. Communities built around survival and shared identity. If you look at where Ukraine is on the map, Ukraine is literally the center of civilization. Ukraine is not just defending borders, it is defending the roots of civilization itself. Before pyramids, before Mesopotamia, there were Ukrainians building the first great cities. They were planned, they were organized, they were visionary. A people who gathered not under palaces but in shared houses of assembly. That is the heritage Russia is trying to erase. Proof that Ukraine has always been a cradle of civilization, not a colony on someone else's map. This war is not about one generation. It is about 10,000 years of memory. If that memory is lost, history is rewritten, and the world loses its oldest lesson, that peace order and shared life began here. Ukraine's survival is the survival of our oldest hope, that humanity can choose community over empire and creation over destruction. Refill the swamp. Because sometimes the best weapon against Russian tanks isn't a missile, it's the mud beneath their treads. Hear me out. Scientists in Germany, together with officials in Finland and Poland, are pushing a new idea, rewetting wetlands as defense. When wetlands are restored, the ground turns too soft for tanks and heavy armor. This isn't theory, by the way. In 2022, Ukraine flooded the Irpin River to stop Russia's advance on Kyiv, and it worked. Now, the EU is considering funding larger projects. Proposals are ranging from 250 to 500 million to restore up to 100,000 hectares of peatlands. Beyond defense, restored peatlands also trap carbon, helping fight climate change. Farmers could adapt by growing reeds or moss that thrive in wetlands, and the strategy would apply especially in Eastern Europe, such as the Baltics, in Poland, Finland, and Ukraine, where turning the land back into swamps could block future invasions. The lesson is simple. You don't just fight with missiles and tanks, you fight with the land itself. Refill the swamp, and you stop tanks, cut carbon, and remind the world that resilience can be as powerful as firepower. And that's the point. Ukraine's fight is not only about weapons, it's about survival, it's about resilience, it's about the power to turn even rivers and swamps and use nature into lines of defense. But none of it, not the drones, not the defenses, not even voices speaking truth, exists in a vacuum. It exists because people like you choose to stand with Ukraine. When you donate to Ukraine, you're not giving charity, you're investing in the only future where freedom survives. When you support this channel with memberships and super chats, you're not just keeping production going, you're fueling the fight against disinformation. So, thank you. Also, when you like, comment, and share, you're pushing the truth further than any missile can reach. And with YouTube's new hype feature, you can now amplify that impact even more, right here in real time. You can also donate directly through Buy Me a Coffee link. It's in the show notes below. This isn't just a video, this is the front line of information. Because if Russia wins with terror and lies, every democracy loses. But if Ukraine holds, then so does the idea that truth and courage can still change history. If there is any justice in the world, Ukraine must win. Peace must prevail. So hit that subscribe, join this fight, and don't let Russian lies be louder than us. My name is Slavie. This is Ukraine Update on channel Yarochenko. See you next time. God bless America and Slava Ukraini.